Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Around the World, where we talk about global culture and citizenship. And today we're going to be talking with my good friend Mariel about her experiences living in Spain. She's been there, she just said 5 years now, almost.
Almost, yeah.
Almost. So she's got a lot of knowledge about Spain and its culture and its stuff, or at least maybe she does. Who knows? We'll find out. That's what the episode's about, right? So Mario, why don't you introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit about you.
Hi, I'm Marielle. I'm originally from Chicago, Illinois, but I've been living in Madrid for about 4.5 years. I previously also lived in Salamanca, Spain, which is like directly in the middle between like Portugal and Madrid, in 2012. And so, but I also I went to college with Mike at Lawrence University, but I graduated from DePaul University. And then about like 4 or 5 months after, I moved to Spain, originally to teach English.
Mhm.
So I got my TEFL degree here, and then TEFL certificate, and then I ended up staying. I did what everyone did. I fell in love, like stayed in Spain, and then I just completed a master's in international education and bilingualism this summer, focusing on neurolinguistics and second language acquisition. And so my primary focus of like what I'm doing is like I am teaching English, but I'm also working on like the mental, like what are the neurological aspects of that with my students. And so yeah, and I love Madrid, and I've kind of traveled all over Spain, and I have a bunch of Spanish friends. And so yeah, Madrid's been my homestay for the last 4.5 years or so. Yeah, that's about
Nice.
it.
That sounds like a really baller master's degree.
Yeah, it was fun. It was really cool. It was
Yeah, that
awesome.
sounds like, because it's like psychology and linguistics and it's all wrapped up into one. Like, that sounds awesome.
Yeah, it was great. And university here is so cheap. I got my full master's was 7,000 euros for the
Oh
full thing.
God.
Yeah. And that's an expensive master's here. Like the MBAs are much more expensive. MBAs will probably rival American prices.
Sure.
But if you go to a public university, their masters are maybe like 2 grand for the whole thing. And so with mine being 7,000, most people here were like, oh, that's a lot of money. But coming from the United States, like
Right.
studying school, it was absolutely, it's just, you can't even compare.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Like that's like almost like the extra prices of going to Lawrence, not the tuition, but just like the room and board and the meal plan and like all that.
and
Almost.
I
Yeah.
think loans has gone up, what, like 15,000 since we were in school,
Something like
I
that.
think.
Yeah. Yeah. It's expensive. Woo. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So you're in Madrid. You're teaching English, which is awesome.
Yeah.
Um, so and you said you've been traveling a lot. Where are the different places you've gone in Spain? And like, is there a favorite place that you've traveled to?
Okay. So in Spain, I've been to Catalonia, which is Barcelona, which is in Catalonia. I've been to Valencia,
Hmm.
this town of Valencia. I've been to a couple towns in Valencia province, as well as Alicante, Cadiz, which is in the south, Granada, which is also in Andalusia.
Hmm.
Um, I've been to Salamanca. I've been to um, Leon, which is in the north. I've been to Asturias. I've been to Basque Country, País Vasco, and I have not been to Cantabria. I've been all over Galicia, and the big city that I still have not been to is Bilbao and Seville.
Okay.
And so those are the two that I don't know, but those are the ones hopefully in the future I'm going to. And then I've also went to Ibiza for the first time in the Canary Islands. And so I've kind of
Oh, very cool.
had most major parts of Spain.
Nice.
And so and I've been able to do that a lot more in the last 2 years, because since I started my master's degree, I stopped doing more like international traveling and traveling more within Spain, because it was much more cost efficient and
Right.
also like time time oriented. And especially with the pandemic, I haven't left the country since Christmas last year, so I just
Right.
traveled a lot
Right.
over like within Spain. But the geographical climate of Spain is it's crazy. There's so many different types of microclimates here
Right.
that you can really find anything in a country about the size of Texas, which is incredible.
Yeah, for sure. And you said you went to the Basque Country. Did you run into any I don't want to call them crazy, but the people who are like, we are from Basque, we're independent. Like,
Oh, like Eka,
yeah,
Eka,
did you get
like the
around
Basque, País
people? Or
Vasco. No, no, I didn't. The Basques. Well, what's very interesting about Spain is Spain has. I don't want to conflude the term like nationalism because I know
right,
nationalism has a very strong and um, negative term to it,
right,
but this idea with like independence within Spain, they're much more nationalists in the terms of we are our country, we are our area, and that's what we
right,
want to be, as opposed to like the rest of Europe, which is I think a lot of these like populist movements in Central Europe, this is just my opinion by the way,
right.
are
Yeah.
much more focused on like xenophobia or racism, like
Hmm.
ethnic superiority, whereas in
Right,
Spain it's a very nationalist center. It's where it's like, so the Basque country is like we are Basque, somos Bascos, so we want to leave, and then Catalonia, for example, like somos Catalans,
right,
like Independencia de Catalunya is like it's just this idea that because we are this country, we want independence, and
right,
it's the same with Galicia. It's the same with Spain. So Spain has this like very strong like nationalistic thing, and that I think kind of derives back from um, like what differentiated Franco from like the rest of
right.
the fascist leaders like Mussolini and Hitler,
Hmm.
because Hitler was much more about like the conquest of Europe,
Right,
whereas Franco was very centered in Spain.
right.
And that
He was
is
very
why,
content with what he had.
yes.
Yes. Yeah.
And he was more about squashing like the individual movements within that differentiated the other groups as opposed to like
Right.
a foremost conquest. And so because of that, like Franco, I think was he was in power for almost 40 years, for a
Yeah.
little
He
over 40
died in like
years.
almost in the 90s. Like he
He
lasted
he
so much longer.
he died in 1975
Oh,
or
was it
4.
75? But like his movement continued until almost the 90s, right?
Well, we're actually seeing a sporadic movement now of populist right wing sides, which is happening all over the United States. It's happening
Right.
in Europe.
Right.
So it like, but there is a very strong memory of Franco because he died 40 years ago. So anyone really over the age of 45 has like a pretty vivid memory of
Right. They know what life under him was like.
it.
Gotcha. Yeah. I was gonna say because other European countries like France and Germany, they had a very strong nationalist movement to unite all the different pieces of their countries. Like the French have all sorts of different like little kingdoms and duchies inside of them, but they're all now French. And I feel like Spain never really had that moment where they all came together. And so all their different regions still very much identify as their own area instead of as Spain, which is
Well, which is because what happened under Franco is like Franco very much like squashed
right,
like any other language from being spoken. And
right.
so like people, this idea where it's even similar in the United States where when we were going through like this erasure of culture of the Native Americans and Indigenous
Hmm.
Americans in the United States in the turn of the 20th century,
Right.
is that he did something very similar, that like he forbid Catalan from being spoken, he forbid Gallego from being spoken.
Hmm.
And so there's this like large generation of people that don't speak it and
Right.
don't know it. And so what they're doing is there's a reactionary movement being like, we are, because our culture was squashed, we
Yeah.
want independence.
Right.
But
They're trying to reclaim their culture.
but there's also like a very large, they're not really doing it as, but then a lot of these movements aren't really based on like we're independent, we want to do it, is we are this thing, we are better than you,
Aha.
and we want to get everyone out of here
Right. We want our
because
own
to get their
space.
own thing.
We want
So it
our own thing. Yeah.
so their independence movement are very nationalistic, in
Right.
my opinion, and very xenophobic in that thing. So I'm much more of a unity of Spain. Like I don't support Catalan independence. I don't
Right.
support Gallego or Basque country, but I'm very for much like a united Spain, but I
Mhm.
understand the reasons like why they did that. I just don't think, not just from like an economic standpoint, because like if, for example, if Catalonia were to like it would destroy the Spanish economy, and it
Oh,
would also,
absolutely.
and Catalonia, the Brussels, the center of the European Union, has repeatedly said that if Catalonia decides to secede from Spain, which they've never been an independent entity anyway, they were a part of the Kingdom of Aragon. They were never an independent
Right.
anything.
Yeah.
Um, if they were to secede, then they would be kicked out of the EU. They wouldn't have any trade
Oh,
agreements.
they wouldn't
Like
even
they would have
take
nothing.
them
It
out.
would be like Brexit, but without anything. Like at least Brexit had an established currency. They had an
Right.
established trade agreements. Like they would have nothing.
Right.
And so they just want it, but they don't understand like the fallback of
Yeah. Silly rebels.
Speaking of an American, where we like originated the Brexit, we were, and people will say, no, the French Revolution was for someone. No, 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 no.
Nope.
Like,
We did it first, but they did it better.
yeah. And we also, like, we did borrow their ideas from the French cafes, but we did it first. So.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, we did. Originalists through and through. So you said that you're in support of like United Spain and all of that. Since you've been there for so long, does that mean that you can vote? Can you vote in Spanish elections?
No, I'm not a citizen.
Okay.
I'm not a Spanish citizen. I'm a Spanish resident. I was on a student visa, and now I'm working on getting my work visa here.
Gotcha. Okay.
And eventually I'll get permanent residency.
Okay.
Or I also have the possible opportunity to get Italian citizenship. That's like a long, it's a process through my great grandfather, but
Okay.
I'm more banking on getting Spanish residency first, and then maybe getting the citizenship for Italy. And if I can get Spain, great, but I would be required to probably have to renounce my
You have to
American
renounce your
citizenship,
American citizenship, yeah.
and I'm not doing that.
Right.
I
Yeah.
will not do that.
It still has some clout despite the last couple of years.
There's a lot of power with being an American citizen, regardless of like, and the thing with the US is like our presidency only lasts, like every term is 4 years, and granted, but even to renounce your American citizenship, it's like over $2,000 you have to pay the US government to renounce it.
Yeah.
So it's not worth it.
I want to leave. Give us money.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right.
Mhm.
Oh, our country, so great.
Yeah.
Okay, so you've been here for a while now, but then was there, when you first got there, were there some things that you needed to like adjust to that you weren't used to in Spain? Like I know that they do like, do they still do like the siesta sort of thing, right? Or do they not
Um,
do that anymore?
some people do. It's just
Okay.
more of the daily hours, the schedule. So here they call the horario diario. So like the daily schedule, the horario is everything's a bit late here. So it's lunch because typically like in between 2 and 4. So
Gotcha.
in the big cities, they don't really do a siesta, but in the smaller cities, like they'll close for lunch.
Right.
And I've seen it also, and since the pandemic, like in bigger cities, like the stores are closed and they are closing for lunch because
Right.
of like the economic hit.
Right.
But in smaller towns, they do the siesta. But I think the biggest thing I had to get used to here was not so much the hour, but the level of bureaucracy with all the papers that I had to get done.
Sure.
Because
Right.
yeah, Spanish bureaucracy is infamous, but and also more or less kind of the accent. Because in the US we learn much more like Latino Spanish, and
Right. Sure.
so I had to get used to that. And also I think just some of the different vocabulary and the different customs, but more or less, I chose Spain because it was a country that felt I felt very comfortable with, that I had friends here previously.
Right.
And so, yeah, that's more or less kind of what I had to get used to. But, and also just doing everything for the first time in my life, in a second language.
Right.
Like
Sure. Of course.
I opened a bank account, I signed a lease, like everything I kind of did, what you do in your adult life post college.
Right.
I did that here in a second language. And so that was a pretty steep learning curve. But,
Yeah, I imagine so. They didn't try to like sneak anything into your lease, right? Where you're like, that was like different. So like, oh, it's an American girl. We could put this in there. And
yeah, no, more or less it was like, I think my first landlord got away with a lot of shady things, but
Oh, sure.
um, it was a good setup,
Right.
and, I was paying eventually at the first I was paying a lot for the area, but then the area went up, and so I had a very, like, I had fixed rent, so it
Gotcha.
was,
Okay.
yeah, it was good, but,
Cool, cool, cool.
so now yeah, and now I live on my own, I have my own studio, so it's lovely.
Yeah, it looks very white and very,
Yeah.
very nice. Awesome. Yeah, much cleaner than my background here. We got
Well, you have a full family and a full house,
this
whereas
is
oh,
this is
oh, I have
true.
a cat,
You
but
got
she's
your
asleep.
you got your one room.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Sweet. Um, so you said that you were learning some of like the culture and the traditions and the customs. What are some of your favorite things that you've kind of grown accustomed to from Spain that you're like, yeah, this is really awesome. Like it was weird to change, like to get used to it, but now I'm like, now you love it, and you're like, this is really awesome.
Well, I think one of the biggest things for me was how physically kind of close people were. So when we greet people, we do the two kisses.
Sure.
Not so much more with COVID,
Yeah.
but so there's a big sense of community, and everyone here is very friendly.
Hmm.
And I think at first, because in the United States, we kind of like shake hands, and there's like this sense of personal space, not
Right.
here.
Yeah.
um, and so sometimes that wasn't very hard to get used to, but it got a little complicated in professional settings.
Sure.
Um, being like,
How
like,
do I
what
do
do I?
this? Yeah.
But now with the pandemic, we just kind of all wave, and
Gotcha.
then my friends will do like a hug, but we like avoid the
Yeah.
face
Don't
area,
touch your
so
face.
it's fine. Um, but and then also the thing I do love about Spain is just like how friendly and how community oriented it is. And
Yeah.
so with dinner, for example, instead of ordering our separate entrees, it's very much a tapas culture. So you order a couple different like plates of tapas and you share it.
Oh, okay.
And so it's kind of more or less the big culture with eating here. Now there are when everyone's like free tapas, that's not really the thing in Madrid.
Right.
Those are much more concentrated in the north and also in the south in Andalusia is in Granada is like a big tapas culture as well.
Okay. Cool, 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 cool. That is, that is cool. It's one of those things like I miss kind of like community dinner sort of
Yeah.
thing. Like that's one of my big things about not being at Lawrence anymore that I miss.
Yeah.
And I know that around here we don't do that kind of thing. So
No. No.
having like a big get together is,
Yeah. I mean,
especially
and
well now,
Spaniard,
especially can't do it really, but
no.
yeah,
And
especially in Wisconsin.
yeah, how is it in Wisconsin? How are the cases blowing up?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, of course in
Yeah.
Chicago. I heard Chicago's pretty bad.
Chicago's pretty bad, but up here is really bad. Like we led the country in cases per capita for like a month or something like that, and
Because
it's still
people
going up. It's
because people
funny,
don't like
yeah. Every
mask.
week or so, they send out a message like, "Hey, we'd really like to open the schools, but we can't because you can't get your stuff together." And like that's like what the school district is saying basically. It's like, yeah, we're great.
It's
We're
it blows my mind because like I mean I've been wearing masks since I think I had COVID in March, the first
gotcha.
week of the confinement.
Yeah,
Uh and but I did get an antibody test in September and it said negative, but it had been like 5 months
right.
since.
So it might have,
Yeah,
yeah,
but I'm pretty sure I had it. I didn't go to the ER, but they did count my case as like a suspected case when I called the hotline.
right,
Um, but I mean, I've been wearing a mask since before it was even mandated to wear a mask because I
right,
was sick. And so,
right,
and everyone here wears a mask. It's like a federal mandate that you do
right,
it and people comply. And so, for example, there's a lockdown in Ireland currently where people can't leave go more than 5 kilometers, like 3 miles from their house. And
right.
so what's baffling for me is that there's no mask mandate. And
Really?
so
In Ireland, there's no
there's
mask.
no mask mandate. Yeah. And so like you're having a lockdown
Right, but
and
you're not going to make people wear masks.
no. And
Right,
we've been in Spain, we've been able to go to restaurants since June
right.
and
But you guys figured it
indoor
out.
restaurants. Yeah.
Yeah,
And
because like,
we go to gyms and yeah,
yeah.
because we wear masks
Well,
everywhere,
so
everywhere,
yeah,
outside.
here it's been completely different. Like we, you know, it started happening. Everybody's like, well, let's just calm down. We'll wear some masks. It'll be fine. and then it got bad, and we were like, uh-oh. And so our governor was like, all right, everybody go home. We're shutting everything down. Like, we're gonna wear masks. Everything's happening. And then within 2 weeks, the Supreme Court in Wisconsin canceled his order, and the bars opened back up. Um, you know, buildings were open. There was no capacity limits on anything. And so, of course, we have tons of cases. And every time he's tried to put out a protective order, it's been stricken down. So, um, yeah, our state in particular, but I think mostly it's been Wisconsin and Iowa, and then parts of the South have been the worst ones, because whatever we try to do, it just doesn't happen. So
No surprise there.
yeah. But like, I go
Yeah.
out with a mask, and I'll be walking around, like, or I'll be going to like the grocery store, and I'll be like, mask over, got, all bundled up, wearing my gloves. I'm like, don't touch me. And there'll be people
Yeah.
like, people will literally walk up to the store, because you have to wear a mask now. They'll put the mask on like as they're walking in, and then the moment they walk out, it's off in the trash, or even worse, just on the ground. And then they'll
Yeah.
walk away. And it's like, yep,
Now, yeah, I mean, I get like if you're out in the woods with nobody around you, you don't need to wear mask.
yeah.
It's like
What do you
you,
expect? The trees?
and so I can see in like really small towns where there is like nobody in the street and you walk around without a mask, then
Right.
fine, whatever. But
Mhm.
within like a bigger broad community, because there's a high concentration of people,
Right.
and a lot of people also say it's like it is done transmission indoors. But the thing is that I don't know. I'm not a scientist. I've been kind of avoiding the numbers of
Right.
COVID in Spain, but it's there's transmission, really everywhere. But I do think that you can, like, if I put my mask on to go to the bathroom, I sit
Right.
down, I take it off, and then you like walk down. It's just you sit down, then you can take off the mask. And in some places
Exactly.
is like while you're not eating, you wear the mask on, and some people do, some people don't. I don't personally, but
Mhm.
it's it is what it is. And but
Yeah.
I mean, I do think that after going through, I went through one of the strictest confinements in the world.
Right.
Like, people in the United States will say quarantine. That was not. They don't even call it a quarantine here. They call it el confinamiento, which is the confinement,
Right.
because we're literally confined to our homes. Kids did not leave their apartments
Right.
for 7 weeks.
Right. Right.
And so it was it was one of the strictest measures outside of Italy. Like, people in France you could still go out for a walk, you can't
Right.
do that here.
Yeah. No, I mean, nothing really has changed here. This entire time, I've been able to leave my house. I've been able to go on a run, like, and I've been super careful, and I haven't gotten it. But like, for the most part, it's like there was no confinement. Nobody was really asked to stay home, and the people who did stay home were the ones who were so ill that they couldn't leave.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it's been a mess over here, and I'm really glad for you guys that you guys at least
Yeah.
were willing to respond in a way that was beneficial.
Yeah, I think it was good. I would not, I do think that the measures of what they did were too extreme, to the fact that like you couldn't go out for a walk, or
Right.
you
Sure.
couldn't go for a run, especially with kids.
Right.
Um, because I think there's a huge socioeconomic difference there. And I think a
Right.
lot of these people, it became a lot more about power,
Right.
as opposed to, because that's been like our power play. And it was, I mean, I've never been in a place of privilege, because I'm extremely privileged. Like, I can walk with police and never be afraid, even
Right.
though I am an immigrant. Like, I'm a white American female who can pass
Right.
as a light Spanish person. So it's like I never have to be afraid of that. But
Right.
when you walk outside and you're afraid of the police for the first time, is very scary.
Right.
And it was definitely, I I would not have done the level of strictness of the confinement, but we did get it down.
Right.
And it was what we had to do it. But it was, I think, but it's a temporary solution. Like, you're never going to, because once it goes back up, then cases will explode.
Yeah. Exactly.
But I think like a Europe, I do think, has a much better way of handling it. But Spain's been one of the worst countries hit.
That's
in
true.
Europe. It's the epicenter of Europe.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, COVID.
So
Yeah. What a year. 2020 can be.
yeah, it's been crazy.
Yeah. Yeah. Although I don't think 2021 is going to be much better. So at least around here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So have you been able to see your family this year, or have you just with you, Chelsea and Cameron?
We have seen my dad. He came up a couple different times. Um, and back in July, my grandma died, and I traveled down to Illinois for her funeral. So I have been able to see my family. Um, Chelsea's parents, they don't live very far away. They come over every once in a while. Um, but my mom has definitely been not, she hasn't been coming. She was going to come a couple weeks ago. And then the cases surged again. And so she was like, I'm just going to stay here. And I was like, sounds great. Um, so, Thanksgiving's just going to be us. We're not going to be seeing anybody really. Um, that's probably going to stay the same for Christmas too. We're not going to be traveling. We're not going to be getting around. Um, so yeah. And then you can't even come back.
I am. I'm coming
Oh,
home
you
for
are. They're
Christmas.
going to let you back. You're going to let you back in the country.
Well, I think since the directive with Spain or with the United States, at least from when I remember with Trump, yes, they will. I've had friends travel back, but as an American citizen, they can't turn me away.
Oh, good
It's
point. Good point.
under
But then will
that
Spain let you
directive.
come back afterwards?
Yes, because I have the documents that I need to come back.
Uh-huh.
And so they are letting people kind of come back into the country, but you have to have like a PCR test, a negative PCR test from
Sure.
like highly restricted countries. And so that will
Right.
be when I get back. But
Gotcha.
no, I will be. I haven't seen my family for a year. So it's been
It's a long
it's
time.
it's been a long time. This is the longest I've ever gone with. The second longest was my first year, which was 9 months, but
Right.
this is the longest.
Yeah.
But fortunately, this year has flown by so fast that um, it doesn't seem like it's been a year. But
Yeah. But it has been. Yeah.
so, looking at the questions that you were sending me too, I was like, if you wanted to like switch more over to like maybe talk about something more positive about Spain because instead of just
Yeah,
COVID.
absolutely. We can
Um,
totally do that. Yeah. So, not talking about disease and death. Um, what is like a positive stereotype you could make about Spanish people? Um, yeah.
super open, super vivacious, very nice, a little bit chaotic in a good way. In a good way, I would say
Yeah.
that Spain has this idea of it's called functional chaos,
Okay.
where it's once you figure out how the chaos works, it somehow works. But
Yeah. You can
it,
join in the chaos and be okay.
yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
but I'm naturally like that. Like I'm naturally more of a chaotic person, and I kind of thrive in chaos. So, but most people would be like, this is absolute
This is bonkers. I can't handle it.
like baloney. But
Yeah.
it's once you figure out the system, it more or less like follows. And they're very like people are very creatures of habit.
Sure.
At least I found that Spaniards like are very, very much like habitual in what they do. And
Gotcha.
so if it is a chaotic like habit, then they continue. Like this idea of seguir. So like the word like moving forward is like seguir adelante. So like seguir is like to follow or to do so, like to follow or keep doing something. And so
Mhm.
like this idea of you just keep doing what it is and more or less it kind of hopefully works out.
Yeah, they just keep rolling with it
Yeah.
regardless. Nice. So speaking to that then, is there something that like since you grew up in America, is there something from Spain that you think America would benefit from, like either culturally or anything like that like whether it be that or something else?
Well, number one would be like the food, the Mediterranean diet. I do think
Right.
American food and diet is horrendous compared to European like standards, but I also realize that we're in a much bigger country,
Hmm.
and like the ability to get fresh food is different, and it's a huge
Sure.
class economical divide. But I do think in Europe food is much it's much healthier. It's produced, actually you can eat like very cheaply
Right.
with like very good ingredients and still be very healthy.
Right.
So I do think this mentality of like American food consumption is outrageous.
Hmm.
I do think things are a bit slower here, and people like they work to live as opposed to like live to work. And so there's
Right.
not this like massive sense of urgency, but then also just movement. People here are very active and people go outside and they're not so heavily sedentary like they are in the
Right.
United States. I think it would be a I think it would be a mistake to try to say that the US of 330 million people should be adopting like the public transport, the norms, or the
Right.
socialized healthcare of a country that has 40 million people, because I think it's a much like it's a much bigger country, and it would be irresponsible. It wouldn't be applied in the same way that it functions in Spain. But I do so.
Right.
I mean, maybe it could. I'm not an expert on that, but I'm just gonna say like the cultural aspects I think would be much better
Yeah. Oh,
for me.
absolutely. There's, I feel like in America we could eat that way, but it's purposefully made expensive. Like you go to the grocery store and you want to get like organic food or whatever, and it's like $3 more than the regular one. And you're like, okay,
Completely.
yeah, I guess I can't eat organic food then. Or um, same thing with going outside. Like we don't have bike lanes everywhere. We don't emphasize exercising in the same way, making it part of like a daily life. Whereas I feel like, because I've been to like Italy and I've been to even England, and it seems like they have those sorts of things in place where it's like it's easier to make that part of your life than here, where it's almost actively they're actively against you doing those sorts of things.
Absolutely.
So yeah, which is awesome. So what's your typical then, if your three meals, what do you have for breakfast, lunch, and dinner in Spain if you were going to stay?
Well, unfortunately, I don't eat your typical Spanish food every meal, because Spanish food for me, like restaurant Spanish food, is actually quite greasy. It's quite heavy, and
Yeah,
I don't like
sure.
that as much. But and I'm not as busy as I should be. But breakfast, I'll have cafe con leche or something with coffee. I don't drink as I drink black coffee in the U.S., but in Spain or with I drink espresso.
Sure.
And I bring espresso stovetop, so I'll have like coffee with a little bit of milk, and then maybe like a croissant or a pastry, or maybe some cereal and some fruit. It
Right.
depends if I go out for breakfast.
Right.
Another very popular thing that you eat for breakfast in Spain is a tostada con tomate. So it's like toasted bread with like a tomato paste and olive oil. It's very, very, very good. Um,
Sounds good.
Highly recommend it. Lunch, I will have uh, again, if I go out, most Spanish people for lunch will have lunch is like the biggest meal of the day.
Sure.
And so because it's longer, it's much more family oriented. Whereas like in Italy and the United States, like dinner is the biggest
Right.
one.
Hmm.
Um, but I'll have maybe some sort of like vegetable or chicken and fish.
Hmm.
Like if I'm going out or if I'm at my friends' houses for in Spain at like their family houses. And then
Hmm.
at dinner, it's a bit lighter. So dinner I'll maybe have a pasta or a salad, or I still follow a lot of just the meal traditions. For me is where my main meal of the day is
Right.
dinner. I
Right.
prefer like a bigger breakfast and bigger dinner. But that's just how I am. And then at 6 o'clock, we have dinner very late here. Dinner is like in between 9 and 10:30.
Oh, geez.
So, and then at 6, we have something called a merienda, which is like a early supper. But no, we have dinner very late here.
Really?
So 9:30, 10 is when people have dinner in Spain. So,
Jeez.
um, yeah, it's a very different
Yeah,
culture.
that's a big adjustment.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because like I know last night we had dinner at like 5:30, but we were really hungry. So I was
Yeah.
like,
No. If I'm hungry, I'll have dinner maybe at like 8.
Yeah.
So it really just depends on when I eat. And it's just because I think here it follows the rate of the sun, because Spain
Sure.
is on the is the last country on the Central European time zone. And so here we are one of the last to get up in the morning, because the
Gotcha.
sun rays, like I don't see sunlight until about 7:30, 8 o'clock in the morning.
Okay.
And so at 6, it's still very dark.
Right.
And the sun will set here much later. So the thing is that I think Spain, because of that, it follows this
Right. You're
culture where
kind of
it is
adjusted
very
to
late.
when
Yeah.
the sun's up. Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, I was gonna say because like it's like pitch black at like 4:30 now here. So
Yeah. I think it's 5 o'clock, and it's almost 6, and it's starting to get a little bit dark.
that's nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like almost 11 a.m. now, and it snowed yesterday. Or so yeah, I know. How much snow do you get in Spain, if any?
In Madrid, I've only seen it snow maybe 3 times, and at most like 2 inches. But we get snow in the mountains.
Right.
We get a lot of snow in the mountains. So we couple feet in the mountains, I'd say. And there's a couple ski areas like within an hour of Madrid.
Okay.
So we are actually the highest capital in Europe. So I think our
Oh, so you're
elevation,
like up.
we're at 2,000 feet
Okay. Gotcha.
over
Yeah.
above sea level. So it's about 670 meters,
Okay.
70 meters above sea level. So we're a very high capital. And so because of that, we have mountains that are like 4,000 feet high that
Gotcha.
get a good amount of snow.
Cool. 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 Here's something I'm interested in. I know that Spain is like a really big soccer country, and I should
Yeah.
it's football. But what other sports do Spaniards do? Like, are there other things that they're really into other than soccer?
Yes. So the two biggest sports that people will follow after that would be tennis and basketball.
Okay. Oh,
Bas-
yeah. I should have thought of basketball.
yeah.
Tennis. That's okay.
Oh no, yeah. Paul Gasol, like the Gasol
Right.
brothers. I think they're from Barcelona. They played for one played for the Bulls. Paul Gasol played for the Bulls,
Yep. I'm
and
pretty sure one of
then
them's on the Lakers now or something like that. He's
yeah,
still playing. One
Lakers.
of them's still playing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So they follow them, and then so they do have a league in Spain, a basketball league. I've never followed it, but they do. So the basketball team in Madrid is Real Madrid, as well as one of our soccer teams, football teams
Oh,
is
so they
Real
have the
Madrid.
same name.
Yeah,
Gotcha. Okay.
and then tennis, because of
Sure.
Rafa Nadal.
Right.
So Rafa Nadal, but everyone's been playing paddle. So like recently, a lot of my friends are like, "Oh, I have a paddle game. Tengo un partido de paddle like este sábado por la tarde." It's like I can meet before or after paddle. I was like, okay, all right. So everyone is kind of playing paddle,
Okay.
uh, and then a lot of people bike. A lot of people are cycling. A lot of my friends are like obsessed with mountain biking.
Gotcha.
Um, so I would say the two biggest are that they follow would be basketball and tennis, but then the sports that they're playing are a lot more of like cycling and
Gotcha.
paddle.
Right. Well, those seem to be like sports that you could get into
Yeah,
regardless of like your age and your like
absolutely.
economic status. Whereas like like basketball is a pretty fund intensive and like body intensive sport. Whereas like anybody can ride a bike for the most part. Um, so something else, I feel like train of thought. It's early for me.
It's fine.
um, so like Latin America and the Caribbean, they're also Spanish speaking, but they obviously have very different
Yeah,
cultures and traditions and all of that. Um, and so like in my mind, because this is just kind of the way I think, I've always thought of Spain kind of as like this like mother of other Spanish speaking countries, and all the other countries have like grabbed little bits of it, like their traditions from them. And I'm
yeah,
not sure if that's actually true. Like I feel like they're all because they're all so diverse and different. But
Very
is that true, or is that
um, I mean, if you want to talk about more of like the Catholicism and the colonial of Catholicism, yeah.
sure? I guess,
Um,
yeah, that would make
but
sense.
Spain is vastly different from Latin America. And that
Right.
is one of the things that I realized when I came here was the
Mhm.
difference of like, I don't want to say like the lack of color in the culture is just because I mean, I think Spanish culture is very, very vibrant, but
Right.
like their food is not as heavily spiced. It's
Mhm.
not very spiced, like it's picante, it's not very spicy. It's very plain in a way. And
Right.
I feel like Spanish culture is a lot more kind of, I wouldn't say reserved, but they're very much more European, whereas like Latin American culture is what we grew up with, which is
Right.
like this very, very vibrant, colorful
Right.
culture, which Spain is, but that's normally in like the South. That's Andalusia, that's Sevilla.
Right.
But like when we think about like Mexico and all their traditions and Colombia and Venezuela and
Right.
like this idea of these stereotypes of a Latino woman, it's like Spain is not that way.
Right.
And people will like very much in Spain, they're like, I'm not Latino, I am
Right.
not Hispanic, I am
Right.
Spanish.
Right. And
And
I'm different because of that. Gotcha. Okay.
like Spaniards will actually get offended. Like if you go to the United States and you're like, oh, you're like, and Mexico, I feel like white Americans have this tendency to where anyone who is Hispanic is they just assume they're all from Mexico. And I'm like,
Right.
no.
Yeah.
But I mean, we're ignorant, so I guess whatever. But yeah, so and like they'll assume like if you're Spanish that you're Hispanic and they'll
People
in
get
Spanish,
really offended by that.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
they'll get very offended.
How dare you think I'm from one of those colonies? I'm from the real thing.
Well, it's kind of funny, like similar when Americans, and I've been guilty of this when Americans get like when Canadians get lumped in with
Yeah.
Americans,
How dare
like
you lump us in with them?
because I'm like, I'm sorry, if you're from Toronto, your accent is the same
Right.
as Ohio.
Right.
Like we're both white and American. There's not much of a difference between us, but they will get equally offended. So that's
Gotcha.
something that you have to get used to.
Yeah. Yeah. Gotta know what you can say and what you can't say.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The political correctness here is like they are not the people in Europe are not politically correct, and so
I
like
imagine not.
the one thing that they do say about Americans, we get super offended really easily, and I do think that is absolutely true.
It's because we're
And
Puritans. We're all Puritans.
it is. I mean, I feel like, and I do feel that one of the reasons like that people in Spain are just they're not as offended. And I think because of that is there's a much more, but they also don't have the history inbred within the country
Right.
of like the amount of like racism and like tension and
Right.
like physical slavery that we do that they don't understand. But at
Right.
the same time, like there is this American thing where it's like you tread on thing. Like, I mean, I personally even I don't know what is PC and what's not anymore, but it's like I try to very much tread carefully. In Spain, there's like
I'm just gonna
and
do my
it's just
thing.
like, yeah.
Right. Yeah.
So there's some upsides and downsides of that, but
Right. Hmm. You mentioned Catholicism, and it's obviously a huge part of Spain and their history. But Islam also has a really big history in Spain.
oh, absolutely huge.
Right, for like a long time, the that first Islamic empire controlled a large portion of Spain.
Yeah.
Have you been able to interact with that community or see that part of Spain at all?
Me not. I do have some. Well, okay. So the thing is that Spain. So the Moors took over
Right,
Spain in 711 is
right,
when they conquered, and then they were more or less driven out by the Catholic kings
right,
in 1490
right
something.
around then. Yeah,
Yeah. And so the thing is, so it's been about 500 years, but Spanish actually Arab language, like Arabic, any word that's any AL sounding word in Spanish is based off of Arabic.
gotcha. Okay, so it
So
is still
like the Alhambra,
mhm,
a pillow is Alhumada, so ALHUMADA is pillow. and
Right.
then alma is soul. And so any word that derives with al is derived from Arabic,
Cool.
has an Arabic base. And so there's a lot of Moorish in the culture, in mainly in the south of Spain in the
Right.
culture. But I there's not like a huge Muslim influence in Madrid per
Mhm.
se. Um,
Right. They didn't really ever get that high in the country.
no, not as high because and the north of Spain has been very predominantly Catholic.
Right.
And even though people aren't as like, I think the religiosity is
Mhm.
much higher, I think, in the United States than in Spain, but like Catholicism is as ingrained in the culture as the United States is with like puritanical Judeo-Christian values. Like even though we won't admit it, is our country is heavily ingrained with these Judeo-Christian values.
Right.
And it's the same here in Spain. Like whether or not they go to church is like they go to church because they're like that's just what
It's
you
just
do.
what you do. Right. Yeah. Gotcha. Yeah, I was gonna say, because like, because you said you'd gone to like Cadiz and Granada, and I know those have like this beautiful Muslim architecture, and all that stuff. And I know that they were expelled at a certain point, but like, you know, I'm assuming that like every other European country, you've had some sort of immigration from North Africa or the Middle East. How has
Mhm.
Spain handled that? Because I know France has been very um, anti that as of late. Is Spain more welcoming?
Um, this is a very controversial question, but I think Spain is one of the most um, friendly countries to immigrants I've seen.
Okay,
Um, and the thing is that there's, I think, a huge thing that's coming in from Granada. And I also do think it has been one of the issues that has very much um, sparked a movement of an increased movement of the populist, of the right, of the
sure,
alt-right in
because
Spain.
they're seeing people that aren't Spanish.
It's not so much that aren't Spanish, it's just that because there's this idea of like universal health care
Right.
and that we're taken care of. And I mean, I've been in Europe for the last 4 years,
Mhm.
last 5 years. And so the thing is like, there's not just an issue about them coming over and escaping like really, really bad conditions in North Africa. It's
Mhm.
what they are doing in
Now
the
that they're
countries
in.
that are going. Yeah.
Gotcha.
And I mean, there's been huge issues with like attacks and with sexual assault in Germany, and this like idea of being entitled to these help. But that again, this is just like from what I've seen. But in Spain, I do think Spain, because we are in the south, there's a lot more problems. But in Spain, from what I've seen, um, people who are immigrants, I do think Spain is one of the most friendly when it kind of comes to like they make it hard to immigrate here, but they kind of turn a blind eye to a lot of illegal immigration, at least like if you're like white like me. Like
Right.
I know a bunch of people who kind of have been in Spain illegally and they just like as long as you are not causing a problem,
They
they're
don't
not going to
care.
bother. They
Right.
don't they won't bother you. And there's also a lot of there's a lot the racism in Spain, there's xenophobia, but it's a lot more passive as opposed to aggressive.
Sure.
So in Eastern and Central Europe, there has been a huge increase of um, attacks
Right. Like
based like
violence.
jihadi attacks, like in Germany, in France,
Right.
but they are also extremely xenophobic, extremely Islamophobic, and
Right.
they are like and on a daily basis. And in Spain,
It's much more subtle.
they're like there's a lot more passive accepted racism here,
Right.
but the difference is it's not aggressive, it's not mean, it's just they'll like make snide remarks. And the police are like, we for example, we have a lot of people in the center, a lot of Black African men probably coming from like northeast Africa who are
Right.
like who are selling handbags or fake goods.
Sure.
And yes, they are illegal, and yes, they're doing something that is considered illegal, but they're not really causing an issue. they're
Right.
not they're not like robbing people, they're not hurting any of the tourists, they're not hurting
Right.
any of the
They're just
people.
trying to
And
make
so
money.
yeah, and the
Yeah.
police would just like go and kind of yell at them and they run away, but more or less it's like
But they're
there's
not
been
gonna like arrest them or brutalize them or anything like that.
no, I would say, for example, probably the ethnic group that is probably extremely targeted in Europe, in Spain, are the Romani, the Gypsies,
Sure, of course. Yeah.
because they do target I've been they have been targeting and there is like, I don't want to say there is a truth to some of these. They do target tourists. They do send the kids and like take the phones and they do all this stuff. And
Right.
so I would say they do get targeted because
They are
they're,
actively causing issues at some in some
yes,
terms.
yes.
Gotcha.
And but that's just and that's not a generalization. It's just from what I've seen.
Right.
And there's a lot of them who live very peacefully outside the city, and there's no like interaction. But I think with Spain, when there is a big issue happening, like with COVID, or
Right.
like when Catalonia was trying to secede,
Mhm.
the Spanish government was like, no, 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 no,
Yeah.
no,
We're coming
you
out in
are
force.
leaving.
Yeah.
And with the pandemic, with the confinement, they're like, So when there is a big deal,
Mhm.
Spain gets on. And I
Right.
think because they've like with this idea of illegal immigration,
Mhm.
and they've been kind of like more calm, they
Right.
have not been the target of massive terrorist attacks. We've had a
Right.
couple in the last like 10 years, but nothing compared to the rest of Europe.
Right. Yeah. Well, policy shapes what happens. So
Yeah.
if you're not to say lenient, but if you're not actively inducing violence, then violence will not be actively induced upon you. Generally, that's how it works. Not always, obviously, but um, that's, you know, whew. Okay, let's see here.
Sorry for my long rant.
Tune in for Mariel's rant about Spain. Um, okay, I am out of questions. And you've talked about all sorts of cool stuff. You talked about culture, you talked about some of the politics. You've talked about the food, religion. We've talked about we've covered
Yeah.
all the American don't talk about this at dinner topics. Um,
Yeah.
so is there anything else you just wanted to say about Spain or about your experience or about what people should expect when they come or if they
I
come to Spain?
I would say Spain is a lovely country. I think it has really instilled in me how important it is to know a second language. And also don't be one of those tourists that expects everyone to speak English, because in some cases that's the truth, but like no one speaks everything.
Right,
I think it's just about being hospitable. You are in their country.
right,
Yes, like don't just try to learn something, try to learn enough. I've been to countries where I went to Croatia and I literally spoke like nothing, but I
right.
try to learn enough to like try to get by.
Yeah,
But
make an attempt.
yeah, make an attempt. And also when you're in the country is don't be one of the I think Spain is amazing. I do think that it highlights like how important affordable healthcare is. I don't know how to say like the whole of universal healthcare, but I think it shows like how much affordable healthcare needs to be. I have premium private insurance and I pay $50 a month. And it's like it doesn't cover my prescriptions, but my prescriptions are still cheap. My
Right.
prescriptions without insurance are like $3.
Gah.
So I don't know. I'm never going to pretend that I know how the insurance industry works, so I'm not going to say it. But it just shows that like there is something with
There is an
medication. But
alternative to
I have private insurance, and so it shows that like their privatization of insurance in Spain is still
right.
very good here. So I think that's more of the drug companies or the insurance companies as opposed to like the system itself. But
A whole nother video.
not and I don't know.
Yeah.
But I do think Spain is a beautiful country. I will also say it's been a blessing. The upside about the pandemic is that American tourists weren't here. Sorry. So I got to travel Spain without a bunch of the giddy American tourists. So if you want to get stuck in a pandemic, get
Move to
stuck in
Spain.
another European country. Or no, yeah, for sure.
Right.
Absolutely. But yeah, I think Spain's beautiful and Madrid's better than Real Madrid. No, it's like but, I love Barcelona, but Madrid is much better. So, but yeah, other than that, nothing is good. I wish you guys all the best in the US. So,
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for making time in your day to talk with me about Spain. And if you want to see other videos in the series about the other countries we've talked about, there will be a link in the description of the video, and you can check them out. We've talked to a couple different places already. We've got more coming, so
great.
got a few lined up, like France and potentially Israel and I can't remember the other one, but there's another one. Working on it. Oh, it's not there. Whatever. Anyway, thank you guys so much. See you next time for more around the
Okay.
world. Yeah.
All right.
Bye.
Bye. Thanks.